Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 31, season 2 of Red Wings Rant. I feel like I almost said our old podcast name right there. Where tirades and impassioned pleas for your Detroit Red Wings now have a home. That's right here at Red Wings Rant. And today, Mike, instead of talking about two straight shutouts, why don't we talk about Tim Peel and the NHL Draft Lottery getting some switch-ups, and, of course, as promised, Scott Wheeler. Here,
we got him.
To discuss Red Wings prospects. Had an absolute blast talking to him, so we will have that on the tail end of the episode. But before we get into all that fun stuff, Mike, Matt's gonna turn off the music. Boop! And then let's get into some biz.
Biz? What do you mean by biz? All I see is fun, like tournaments. And boy, oh boy, the big old March tournament is in full swing. Oh boy, DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers in the center of action. That's you, maybe, unless you've already got the app. Bet $1 in any tournament game, and if your team wins, you win $1 times 100. That's simple. Turn $1 into $100 with $100 to 1 odds. Who can lose? Pick any college basketball team that's still in the hunt for your shot at winning $100. All it takes is a $1 bet, and, of course, that team has to win. There's no better way to put your college b-ball hoop knowledge to the test than to turn off a hockey podcast and put your money where your mouth is with DraftKings Sportsbook.
Don't worry if college basketball isn't for you. DraftKings Sportsbook has 100 to 1 odds on select fighters for this weekend's UFC 260. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable, so you can deposit and withdraw your funds at your convenience. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code THPN when you sign up to turn $1 into $100. The college basketball team of your choosing pulls off the win. That's code THPN. To turn $1 to $100 for limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT. All right, Mike. Like I said, let's. Oh my God, we lost literally everyone that was watching. They're all gone. Thank you, DraftKings. All right, move. Jeez, all
right.
We'll hit the fast forward button next time we read those. But everyone that enjoyed that DraftKings promo, we hope you come back for the podcast some other day. All right. So what do you want to tackle first, Mike? Do you want to get the boring stuff out of the way, or you want to do some hot takes on game management from referees?
Boring stuff. Man, this is a week of hot news. Woo! We got 2 weeks worth of, or 2 years. We can actually tank with purpose, Matt. The draft lottery is ours to win. Yes. Woo! Matt, just imagine. Listen to this. Matt, our boy broke it down for us. Friend of the show, Mr. Greg Wyshynski, if you're of the motherland, basically just explained that the lottery will now determine only the first 2 picks of the draft rather than having 3 different lotteries for the first 3 picks, which is complete nonsense. Teams can move up a maximum of 10 spots by winning one of the 2 lotteries. Hence, only 11 of the 16 teams that miss the playoffs will be eligible for the first overall pick. A franchise can win the lottery no more than twice in a 5-year span that isn't exclusive to the first overall pick. It means a team can advance by reason of lottery win more than twice in a 5-year span. Starting then. So what I read is that other teams, the Rangers, can still come up top and take advantage and win. It doesn't start retroactively which would be nice because we're the only team that, my God, have we moved down, 8 spots in the last 3 or 4 years?
It's like, I think we talked about it last year, but like since they started doing the draft lottery, like our position has backed up like a total of like 30 spots, like a cumulative number of 30. And like it's just the next, like the second place team is at like 10 or 8 or something like that. So it's just, it's been awful. There's a lot of complaining going around, but obviously this rule is in place because of how terrible we were last year and what a terrible draft pick we got, even though we're all sold on lucky Luke Raymond. So it's just there's a lot of ways to look at this, Mike. There's the we won't get screwed as bad again, or you can look at it and go, looks like we'll be getting screwed some other time in the future once we hit those 2 lottery wins, and then another Shane Wright comes down. Thankfully this does mean that there's no way we can get screwed completely out of Shane Wright. Like it's not like they said you could only win one draft lot, like you can't win back-to-back draft lotteries, then we'd go, oh well, the Wings are going to win this year and then we're going to be screwed out of Shane Wright next year, which you can't manage your team to go, oh man, if we don't draft Shane Wright next year, we're screwed. But you know what I'm saying? Like you absolutely, like this is probably the year of the last decade where, maybe looking at the Nolan Patrick year too, but it doesn't really matter if you're going to win the draft lottery or not. You're going to get a solid guy, and you're not going to get the game changer for next season. Top to bottom. Yeah. You might luck into it, but the consensus on the prospectus is that that's not going to happen. So,
these rules are fun, right? Because you're like, oh boy, can't wait for the future. But the dust is already settled. Like for example, if this year it applied this year, right? It means that we would have had Tim, don't call me Stützle, in the winged wheel. And he would also be leading our team in points. Another fun fact. But both of those things are irrelevant, Matt, because it doesn't start this year. It starts later. But I wonder if this kind of makes Yzerman, he's sitting around. He knows Mike's really into me, not, any other Mike. He knows I'm really into trades. And maybe now he's thinking, if I'm really going to tank, maybe we start fielding those Mantha offers, huh? Now we got a shot at least of the 3rd pick if we really suck. Even if we don't get the 1st and 2nd pick, that 3rd pick looks pretty good. Matt, does this increase our odds of Yzerman doubling down on the tank?
I'm pretty sure where we're standing right now, it does not. We don't even need to make adjustments right now.
We've been flying high before these 2 shutouts. We were flying high, brother.
It was Ken Kell who said, make sure that you, in our interview with him a few weeks ago, make sure you take a long look. A big sample is how you're going to build trends. And I'm pretty sure the Red Wings have built quite the trend to say that there isn't somebody on this team that's going to absolutely pull them into a playoff spot. We love some of these guys, but right? No, nobody's pulling us into a playoff spot. We don't have a combo of McDavid and Draisaitl to just will through sheer offensive power this team into the playoffs. So that being said, we're even farther from that because it's pretty hard for us to dig out of the bottom. I think it's just in the cards. It's just those guys are going to get moved regardless. So, or if they, Jesus, they'd have to do so much of a jump forward now and next season to guarantee that nobody that's on this team right now is getting moved. So I just, the NHL Draft Lottery rules changing is irrelevant. It's also the difference between us getting a 4th pick or a 3rd pick. Because it still feels like, this doesn't guarantee we're going to win a draft lottery. This just means we're not going to fall back 3 spots. We're just going to fall back 2. So, all of this it's not going to change Steve Yzerman's plan. It's just now this is where our head is at. And when we plan for us to drop, we just drop a couple of spots. I do think it's interesting that the idea of I want someone to tell me if the draft lottery is for the first 2 spots and the last place team in the league gets the second pick, does that count as them winning the draft lottery? Or do you have to either be, if you're the last place team, you either get the first pick or you have lost the lottery? So I feel like that I haven't read anything there, but I'd like to know.
I think it says you can't advance by reason of lottery more than twice. So
so then advance to me says that if you're
the second team and you end up getting the second pick, you didn't advance.
You've lost. Right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing to me, but I haven't seen that explained anywhere outside of that
outside of my sentence. Yeah.
Outside of that sentence, it still feels like the argument, like if somebody told me right now that no, you are advancing from number 3 to number 2 because if you don't win the lottery, you're third place, but if you win it, you're first or second. So I can imagine somebody making that argument to me, but that's still something I'd like to see in writing so that I know where my head should be at in regards to these new rules. But yeah, like I said, new rules. I think ultimately it's a good thing because if we wind the clock back, I think we would have liked these rules to be in place last year. It's just they weren't. So we don't get to be too excited about these rules. We just get to know going forward we're not going to be as thoroughly effed in the A next time we finish last. If there has to be another reset, then it won't be quite as.
I mean, all we do is drop, really. So I don't know if we're really going to have to worry too much about these rules. About oh no, the Red Wings advanced again. That would be another ice age. I would say. The winter is coming. Pretty long gap there between victories of that lottery, Matt. But it's just weird because we thought this was Hockey Town. We want people to care. I thought for once they would let us cheat and win one of these ping pong ball things, Matt, but not the case. So I thought, well, I guess the NHL's real. And then Tim Peel said, "Hold my hard cider. I got this." The poor guy, he got busted. Matt, what was the quote? I think he dropped an F-bomb on there. Was that a hot mic?
Yeah, comment. This is the key. Like, this is so much bigger than just the quote. Because he didn't even say it to another referee. He said it to a player, and he said it to the player of the team he was calling the penalty on. This is huge. It wasn't much. Here's the quote. It wasn't much, but I wanted to get a penalty against Nashville early. But by the way, if he is speaking to Philip Forsberg, this is actually from Matt Duchesne, who said it was to Forsberg was where this quote was directed. Why is he referring to Nashville in such a way and not just saying you guys? I wanted to put a penalty on you guys early. Like, what? Doesn't Forsberg relate to... Okay, anyway, that's a whole nother grammatical error, I feel like, on Tim Peel's part. We'll get into that for all the Patreon subscribers. But, yeah, I'm like, I mean, this is first things first. Anybody who saw this last night and said, my trust in all things is broken, welcome to planet Earth. If you voted for Joe Biden and expected it to be just sunshine and rainbows, that's why we refer to it always in voting and politics as the lesser of two evils, because all politicians are scum. So welcome to the world. It sucks. And your sports have been managed. Maybe not like to the point where we can prove like the what was it, the Black Sox, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into history because I'm not going to be able to remember. I just know that friends of Nucky Thompson from Boardwalk Empire were involved in it. That's where I know my history for that. So I will say, if someone told me today, I'm not going to be shocked that that's the truth. But, we're not talking evidence as far as that. But this is easy, Mike. This is simple. This is referees and game management. I mean, this is the makeup call. This is everything I think we've known as a thing for years. It's been said since I've been a sports fan. I've only ever heard this, is that there's penalties on like every single play in football. Who knows what the hell a balk is in baseball? Nobody can put a finger on that. It just gets called willy-nilly. It's not a thing. It's just, that guy balked. Take a base. Like, no, nobody ever is like, oh, there's, you never line up with the umpire. Hockey, yeah, just like, I think hockey and basketball are probably like neck and neck, where it's like, there's the makeup call, right?
I will say, Matt, is anyone really surprised?
I hope not, but apparently there are. Like, that's where I say, like, welcome to Earth. Like, yeah, this has been happening forever. Your sports are not pure.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the politically correct thing is to kind of be upset and outraged at the integrity of the game that we hold so dear.
No.
We thought it was a fair shot for both teams when that puck drops, and may the most honest team win. It's definitely, there's narratives that get propelled and certain teams get calls. There's definitely superstar calls where better players get the benefit of the doubt. You definitely see it in hockey. You definitely see it in basketball.
I was listening to Sportsnet earlier today, and they have Ryan Callahan on, and he says, in one part of his conversation, he says, look, referees just need to call it when it's a penalty. And then he's asked, like, 2 minutes later, like, well, isn't it true that veterans are going to get better calls than rookies? Well, like, yeah, you got to earn the respect to get, the notoriety around the league and for referees to be able to listen when you have a complaint. And it's like, so wait, hold on a minute, Ryan. You're going to, on one side of your mouth, talk about how refs just need to call the penalties when they're on the ice. But on the other side, you're like, well, I mean, if it's Lafreniere, he's got to earn it. I mean, he hasn't earned it yet, so he doesn't get a penalty.
Guys, it's Franz Nielsen. Guy's been in the league 20 years. I'm not calling a penalty of Franz Nielsen. Are you out of your mind?
Right. That's the long and short of it right there. It's this guy just thinking in his head, like, how is this going to benefit me the best way possible? And what I do have to give credit to is like Matt Duchene, who at first was telling his story earlier today about Tim Peel talking to Forsberg, and just like casually discussing, like, yeah, Tim just came over to the bench and started talking about it. And then the interviewer had to like push it out of him, like, isn't that weird? Yeah, I guess that's weird. It's like, they don't care. They know it's a thing. But it's like at that time, like, what? Nashville just won. And he even said, like, if I'd be much more upset, like he says in this interview with, Nashville radio, if we had lost that game and then it turns out we lose making it to the playoffs by a point, I'm going to be much more upset. And it's like, yeah, right. So what are we doing? Like, what we did do, Mike, is we fired Tim Peel, who was in his last year. He was going to retire at the end of the season. So the NHL said, here's our scapegoat. He's going to be gone anyway. We'll send him off on early retirement. I'm sure none of this is affecting him financially, which it shouldn't, because this is a thing across all sports. I'm getting so angry at the reaction to this. And if anybody is putting Tim Peel, if they agree with what the NHL is doing, I just, like, wake up. Like, we're watching a league that allows people to punch each other in the head. And then on the flip side, they're going, the integrity of the sport was almost compromised last night. It's like, what do you literally had NHL players die early in life because they've gotten punched in the head too many times. But, oh, God forbid, Tim Peel gets caught doing what what these players have just on either side of their mouth, they're talking like, yeah, this is bad, but it happens.
Just
like,
this. I think it's just a reminder for me of like those movies. Like it'd be a boxer in the 1920s, and he's down on his luck, and so he gets paid to throw a fight, and it's like we're not that. There's no way to ever prove that a referee doesn't have a buddy who's like, hey man, I know they're playing the Red Wings, a real juggernaut, but I'm going to call a few penalties tonight, and the Predators are going to walk away with a shutout win. So, go all in, and you and I will buy a nice boat together. There's no way to like follow up on that stuff. If it's just a few degrees of separation, he could make a lot of people rich. I think that's something to get mad about, especially if you start putting money on these games. Definitely starts to feel like you're not getting a fair fight anymore. But I don't really know what to do about it.
It's one of those things like
you'd have to be like just 1984, not the year. I mean the book, and just have robots officiate the game. There's not really any other way to go about it. I don't. Maybe the penalties, like the repercussions for getting caught, and when they. You'll see those news stories where we very heavily, review the performance of all of our officials, before, during, and after the season and then we score and rate them. And, referees that score and rate better, they get the higher priority games. And it's just impossible to like possibly think you can police that. There's no way. I don't know. They don't
want to police it. That's the thing. They don't care. They just finally got caught. And thank God it was Tim Peel because he was leaving anyway. So they could just like that. That's the problem. I tweeted out earlier today like a fake shocked Jason Segel, and he was the he represented all of professional sports. Hearing that this happened in the NHL, and he was like, "Oh no! Oh my gosh! No way!" Like they all do it.
He should have got an Emmy for that. Wow.
You know what I mean? Like it's not anything that like that's the problem. And the folks that have been tweeting out like the issues are with the rule book, which I really respect that. Like it's too they purposefully make it obtuse so that there is more control. There's more human control in the game than just like you said. What if we had a robot control the game? I think that's more chaos to the executives in the NHL. Then obviously the fan base I think should be all in on that because that's how you get your pure sport. Of course, until we start questioning the programming of said robots, but finding out that they were created in Toronto or something like that, and then you lose in Toronto, and
I think one of the other pieces too is so often players, if they're upset with officiating and they make a comment, they get fined. Coaches, if they get upset with officiating and they make a comment, they get fined. Commentators are just supposed to say, well, that was a little bit of a questionable call, but they can't outright say they usually don't say it's outright bad officiating because, they're essentially, one hand kind of pulls the other to get paid. It's just, like you said, the leagues don't care that much. They would rather like protect their own self-image rather than have you think that it's a corrupt system. That it's until the players can, make a judgment and, on microphone and not feel like they're going to get, penalized, a couple games worth of, salary. It's not going to change. They're just going to get better at hiding it. That's all. I wouldn't be surprised if we also very quietly saw fewer and fewer hot mics opportunities for referees to do that, like a harder way for them to even turn on their mic, when they make the penalty calls, fewer player opportunities for them to be mic'd up, wired for sound for the game. Though that's what's going to happen first. They're going to have fewer opportunities for you to notice rather than just outlaw the bad referees. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Like that's the other thing too. Like, however that got on the air, that's the guy that has been murdered and his family is gone and they're buried in a ditch somewhere. Like that, they're gone. Like that guy's just off the face of the earth. He's done.
Yeah, he got a baseball bat out in the middle of a pond. He's done.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to check the rivers in Nashville. I all right, joking aside, joking about death aside and murder. Mike, we can only go into this so far, but I think ultimately my hope is that anybody who's listening to this or gets a chance to listen to it, just know like this is just more evidence of nothing against the sport of hockey, but why the NHL is the worst thing. Why, you know what? Pro sports. That's just not, most pro sports suck. We just, like you were mentioning earlier, like betting on these things. Mike, I turned $5 into $50 last night using DraftKings. When I signed up, I used promo code THPN. But that's just one of those things where you either have to manage the way you're betting, like I do, or you just, block it out of your mind that the ref is going to screw you over. Because I've also, Mike, been just minutes away from winning like $80 on a couple dollar bet. But some empty net goals go in. And then what? Then I'm just like, well, this stupid game, why do you have empty net goals? And I'm supposed to win based on an over-under. And now I don't win $80 because the Blackhawks scored 2 empty net goals with 15 seconds left. Like, yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? So the refs are in the way, empty net goals. Hockey's just a complete garbage sport to bet on, by the way. Let me just throw that out
Now
there.
we know what Matt's really upset about.
Yeah. Losing money.
He lost a couple of
money last time. No.
He lost a couple of gold coins betting on the old DraftKings.
I think there's only, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, but I just, yeah, like the evil thing here, the evil entity is the NHL because they're not really policing this. They're so lucky that they have a Tim Peel that's leaving already that they can just fire. And then, yeah, ultimately, like, don't even, you have to be upset at the players too, because like I mentioned this interview with Ryan Callahan earlier today on Sportsnet, I think. And, Matt Duchene, like, flipping his story, like mid-interview of casually, it's Tim Peel talking to Philip Forsberg. Then 2 seconds later, it's like, oh, it's so weird that a ref would do that. Whoa! Yeah, it's just the players know what's going on. Tim Peel wouldn't go up to Philip Forsberg and say it if like that obviously wasn't the first time. Come on. Are we really going to believe that? No, we're all smarter than that. Be better. I ask our pro wrestling listeners to be better. You hockey fans, be better. Just don't trust the NHL.
No, don't do it.
Garbage.
Well, I don't know. I it's tough because I'm upset, but I'm so detached to the point where I'm like, well, I shame on you if you don't think that there's just a little bit of shenanigans going on. It's happening. I'm sorry.
Well, Mike, Red Wings also, we signed 21-year-old Seth Barton, got an entry-level contract today. You know what's interesting? So, I mean, what are we going to report? I don't watch college hockey. We can look at the numbers and see that he's 11 points in 20 games. He's a -9. Our lack of availability of statistics, that's what we have. So we can go, all right, he's a defenseman with a -9. Cool. Sorry. I just think it's interesting, Mike, that this is an entry-level contract. And I really wish I had a smidgen of talent because this guy, if you look at Cap Friendly, he's going to walk away at the end of this contract having made $1.6 million on an entry-level contract. He's 3 years in the NCAA. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, ladies and gentlemen. I just, like, that blows my mind. Like, how far away I am from ever earning $1.6 million in 2 years. Man, like, good for him. Who knows, what's going to happen. He might be career in the AHL. And then maybe that, it's a different situation then, but gets those 2 years with this NHL entry-level contract. Goddamn. $1.6 million. All right. Mike, anything else you want to touch on before we jump into our interview with Scott Wheeler of The Athletic?
No, not yet. I'm still trying to read up on some of the trade rumors, and it looks like we still got to wait a little more time here, a couple of weeks. There's still some pieces out there floating out that Tampa Bay would want to snag some Red Wings, but
I've heard it go either way recently, whether teams are going to wait up until the last minute or they're going to be doing it early. And I would bring everybody back to the NHL draft and how that was the longest NHL draft of all of our lives because every team through every round for every pick took every second available to them to make the pick. Where in past years, like rounds 2 through 7 are done in like a half hour. Not so much. So if that's what happened with the NHL draft, where you're in a room and sure, you have to wait for the other team to make a pick, but once you know it, you just go ahead and make the pick, right? It's not, if it takes 30 minutes in other years. All right. So that's my point. I absolutely think these trades are coming soon. I think they're coming fast and then they're going to be done like that. And we're probably going to see nothing on the couple of days of trade deadline. Or if they're not, then they didn't learn anything from the NHL draft and Matt was still right. They're just all dumb. So there's your two ways to look at it.
Well, we narrowed it down. There you go.
I mean, that's my reasoning behind why I think all of this is going to be coming soon, because they couldn't handle a draft where you're sitting in a room with all your buddies that you've been talking to for months. You have your list of guys you're going to draft. Just do it. If that takes forever, you should not be holding on to these trades and just going, well, we've got a couple more weeks. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think it's just going to be our cheaper players. I saw some pie in the sky about trading Mark Stahl, but maybe if Yzerman wants to, say we're going to eat most of that salary if you give us a better draft pick, maybe that'll happen.
That is absolutely happening.
But then I heard that they might bundle my boy Glenn Denning with Mark Stahl, eat some of the cap. So it's going to be really cheap. For like $1 million, you get, like a sixth defenseman and your fourth line center. And then you give us, second or third instead of a fourth or a fifth. So I don't know. I don't know how excited that makes you, but, it sounds like best case scenario is a second or a third. I read an article trying to say we're going to get a first out of the bundle, but I don't know what kind of madman would give up that kind of capital.
We were just talking a week ago with the Tampa Bay Lightning athletic writer. It's escaping me right now, but came up with a trade that him and Max Boltman were going over, where a first-round pick for Mark Stahl and Luke Glendening, and I was like, oh my God, yes! Jesus Christ, get him out of here as soon as possible, yes.
Well, they always do those who says no. Tampa says no. No, I'm not giving you a first-round pick for that. I saw one of the offers was like a Tampa Bay, because, they're the goalie factory, so we try and snag one of their prospects, but I don't think they're giving us a first-round pick, are they?
I mean, yeah, I could not believe that would actually happen. But I think Max Boltman, who was writing the replies on that article, was like, yeah, there's nobody in the league that would say no to this. If you were on the side of it,
man, I could think of like 30 teams.
No, if you were on, wait, I'm sorry. Can we back up? Are you saying that you would say no to receiving a first round pick for Mark Stahl and Luke Glendening?
I want 2 firsts. No, of course I'm okay with it for the Red Wings. Okay. I don't think Tampa Bay would be on board. Yeah,
that's what we're saying. Like, if
the
rest of the NHL is in the Red Wings situation, there's nobody that would say no to that.
It's like, right. Man, face-off percentage really went up in value, huh? Wow.
It's probably a mistake. I think you're missing what I'm saying.
I wonder if they meant to. No, how did that trade even come to be? I can't imagine a first rounder. The only typo I could think is maybe an 11th rounder. Because I don't know if I'd want, Uncle Mark on my team. I don't know.
I mean, there were some other elements of us taking on one of their larger contracts so that they could bring the Cooch back into play, and then we would.
All right. We'll take Tyler Johnson. Jeez. And a first-round pick. Okay.
Yeah, I'd absolutely do that.
And your top goalie prospect. All right, you got me over a barrel.
All right. This is a good time to transition into some more sophisticated language. Of course, that is in reference to Scott Wheeler from The Athletic coming on. Mike, real quick, I thought of this. The Zack Snyder cut. Did you know that like 20% of it isn't, or I'm sorry, 10% of it is in slow motion?
Really?
Yeah. So I thought of that because I re-listened to the interview today and I had to cut a lot of it down because more than half of it, I think, was me talking. So that is nothing against Scott. He was just a very generous guest and let me rattle on and on and on and on before I finally would throw out a question. So I wish this could have gone longer. I had a doctor's appointment with my 1-year-old, so I had to cut him off. But it was amazing of him to be so flexible with his time because he even came in early so I could leave the interview. So Scott is an absolute saint. Hopefully he will get his sainthood for coming on the show and being so flexible with us. Can't thank him enough. And everyone, we've got prospect talk, we've got Vollander, we've got Lucas Raymond talk, we've got Great Britain talk for prospects, and Mike, we even go into WandaVision. So this was a heck of a conversation with Scott. If you guys are not following him on The Athletic, of course, they always have those deals. I think right now they have subscribe for $1, something like that. So, and then find Scott on there. And as we've been talking about for weeks, we wanted to talk about his prospect pool rankings.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike's ready to go because he gets to leave after I start this interview.
Let's get right in.
Here we go. All right, everybody. He likes candy more than chocolate. He has written for the Sun and the Stars from a Toronto perspective, and is the prospect purveyor for The Athletic. He is Mr. Scott Wheeler. Scott, how are you doing? I hope I can call you Scott. How are you doing today?
Yeah, no, I'm doing well. I actually, just before I hopped on with you here, I was doing some video work on William Wallander. So I've been working on Red Wings content all day today.
Well, that's good to know that you're in that headspace because I think for everybody that's a Red Wings fan, as you could probably guess, we've had our eyes on the future for a few years now. Mm-hmm. So that's where we end up taking our conversations for the most part. And it's an absolute joy whenever we can get the likes of yourself. So I couldn't be happier to have you on the show. I think I mentioned to you in a message that my brother and I, who's my co-host, we've been stuck with our 30-minute time frame, which we break all the time on the show. But we've had your top four. Us being number 4, but your prospect rankings for the entire NHL as a segment on the show for literally since it came out. And it just so happens that everybody wants to talk about whatever the last game was the night before. So I'm taking it out of the hands of the fans for this next episode, and they're just going to have to live with it because we can finally talk with the man himself, those prospect rankings. But before we do that, I just want to jump in here so everybody can get to know who Scott is, and I hope we can have some fun with these. But I might have led the witness on what the first topic is, but just to break it down real quick for anybody who's listened for a while or who hasn't heard one of our interviews. Scott, I'm going to give you 4 topics here. You're going to pick one, and then I've got some questions loaded up with those topics.
All right.
So 4 topics. This is the one I probably led the witness on with your intro here. But topic number 1 is candy. Number 2 is video games, if you are a player. Number 3 is television binging. And number 4 is lockdown.
Ooh, television. I could roll with you on television binging.
Fantastic. All right. So this was the one I was just taking notes on because I had I'll let you in on behind the scenes here. I had another topic that might have just gotten a little too I don't want to get anybody in trouble kind of thing. I was going to give you access to somebody's Twitter account, and I was like, let's not do that. But television binging, this is as easy as it can get. But what has been your security blanket, especially over the last year? But what is that show that you just can't get enough of, Scott?
Oh, there's a few of them. I feel like you have to separate the pandemic almost into two sort of separate lives. I feel like the things I was watching early on in the pandemic, which were probably Better Call Saul and Ozark at the time, are ancient history at this point. But
right.
More recently, loved Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso was fantastic. I was a little late to the Ted Lasso train, but it lived up to everything everybody said about it, which is just that it's going to brighten your day and it's going to make you smile and laugh. And the characters are just so well written and it's so charming. I thought the progression of the way that the show sort of developed in that first season was really, really nicely done. So yeah, that Ted Lasso was probably the big one recently. I'm a big Marvel guy as well. So I obviously binged WandaVision, and we're now into Falcon and Winter Soldier, which had its first episode last Friday, which I thought was okay. I didn't love it. But WandaVision was excellent. I actually thought the last couple of episodes of WandaVision were a little bit of a letdown for me. I didn't love them. But the sort of first 6 or 7 episodes of WandaVision were excellent. So that's really been what my wife and I have been watching the last couple of months.
Could I want to take a stab. Like you said, you're a Marvel fan. So I'm wondering if the letdown for WandaVision could have been connected to Quicksilver and possibly maybe just letting the air out of the bag on what could have been and just turning it into something that wasn't as exciting. If any of the letdown related to that?
I think a little bit, maybe. The show had kind of dangled, and then Paul Bettany had also kind of dangled a big cameo that never really happened, and that was part of it. I actually think that part of what was disappointing about the last 2 episodes, if I'm being honest, was that it felt like they were trying to do the superhero formulaic show a little bit more than they were. I think what made the first half of the season, or first 2/3 of the season, so good was just how niche it was and how interesting it was. And then suddenly they're trying to turn it into that big sort of end of show fight, sort of fight for your lives kind of thing. And I just didn't really feel like that fit. That feels like much more of a Falcon and a Winter Soldier kind of thing to me, which is just, Falcon and Winter Soldier just screams, I'm a superhero show, right? Like that's literally what it is. But the WandaVision, I thought it lost some of its charm and some of its uniqueness kind of down the stretch, and it felt like they kind of strayed to try to wrap it up with some big sort of finale, and it just kind of fell flat for me.
Yeah, I think too. I think it was the director of the show came out right before the last episode arrived, and it kind of brought me down expectation wise because he said, "Hey, all those things you guys have been planning, looking for this show, it's probably not going to happen." So I did. This is going to be my terrible transition here, but I did let you know a couple of things I wanted to talk about, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask for anybody that's really. I do my deep dives into prospects when it is the right time of the season, kind of thing. But for you, and why you write these fantastic articles, ranking incredible work of ranking the entire league, is because you spend so much more time doing it. So this question is. As you're going through this, I'm one that had to, in school, talk about emerging markets. And I think I gave you the examples. Just, from a macro perspective, just looking high level here, Brazil, China, Turkey are those emerging markets in the economy. Those are the places that you want to start doing business for those larger corporations, yada, yada, yada. So looking at it from an NHL perspective, and kind of that's how I'm defining that emerging market. Where do you see like those next spots prospect wise? Just to, if it's something you've pulled from doing all the prospect rankings or looking at the future drafts where you see more and more names are coming from, or if it's something like Moritz Seider coming from Germany along with Draisaitl, is it something easier for like the mind to pull out, or do you have somebody in mind that you're thinking this country's going to get involved in hockey? They're doing a little bit now, but it's going to blow up later.
Well, it's a good question. I think at the front of mind ones, in terms of the ones that everybody should be aware of in a very real sense, in terms of the next 5-10 years, is certainly Germany, who you mentioned, and then also kind of the rebirth of Slovakia as a country that has produced major talent. I mean, when it was Czechoslovakia pre-Velvet Revolution, pre-1992, they were a force, right? They were a contender for gold medals on the world stage. And then when the country became a democracy and things kind of broke apart in the early 90s, it started this sort of slow crawl, both for the Czech Republic and for Slovakia, this sort of slow crawl in the wrong direction. And a lot of those other countries, like a Germany and a Switzerland, played catch up. And I do still think that hockey is going to make a resurgence there. It's still one of the most popular, alongside some of the alpine sports, one of the most popular sports in both of those countries. Next year's draft in particular for Slovakia is going to probably have 3 first-rounders, which I would have to go back and look at the history, but I'm guessing you're going back to Czechoslovakia to find 3 first-rounders out of Slovakia proper. So that's one of the places that I would look. The other, which I don't think maybe gets talked about quite enough, is probably Great Britain. I mean, we saw Liam Kirk a couple of years ago, who was obviously an Arizona Coyotes prospect, and he has spent part of this season playing back at home and then also in Sweden. And he may not get an entry-level contract, as it turns out, with Arizona. He's kind of left hanging at this point. He's in a little bit of a limbo. But Alex Graham, one of his countrymen, is eligible for this year's draft. He may not get picked. He's probably going to be like a 7th rounder, or maybe kind of a camp invite, that kind of a player. But it is growing there for sure. And it's never going to be soccer or rugby, et cetera, et cetera. But it has definitely begun to grow there. And when I talk to people over there, especially with Sheffield, which is the team that has developed both Alex Graham and Liam Kirk, they're excited about some of the other kids that they have coming. So that's a bit of a long shot one. And then Japan is the other one that has really started to regularly produced junior level players in Canada and the United States. And those kids haven't tended to translate into NHL picks, but between Ando, who could get picked this year as kind of a 6th or 7th round pick, Usato, who came over and played in the QMJHL last year, there has started to be some of those names that propped up. A lot of them are actually going to be sort of commits to NCAA programs. So NCAA programs are doing their work in terms of starting to find the odd player out of Japan. The high school circuit in Japan is actually, I wouldn't say competitive, because hockey there really isn't competitive, and a lot of those kids have to go elsewhere to play, but there is a legitimate high school circuit in Japan, where almost all of the big high schools in the country have varsity hockey teams that are starting to produce some decent players. And those results are being seen at the lower levels internationally at sort of the 3rd and 4th tiers for U18s and U20s. So those are probably the ones I'd keep an eye on.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic for me, because I feel like when you try to take a look at the Red Wings, they had that success of being one of the first teams to go over and break, they're bringing Sergei Fedorov over, and in the same year they're drafting Nicholas Lidstrom. And it really, back then, I spoke with Keith Gave, who was a major piece in that puzzle. It just was one of those things where it was such a huge risk to go in that direction, especially to take a couple of guys back to back in the draft. But really, it was just them jumping ahead of trends, right? Like when you take a look at it, it wasn't necessarily anybody was looking at Sergei Fedorov and going, he's not going to make it in the NHL. It was just who's going to take that risk to do it first. And I hate to belittle the work that was done to find Sergei Fedorov, but when speaking with a couple of people that were involved, it was like a no-brainer. This kid's going to be a god in professional hockey. Just a matter of bringing him over. And not that it's the same situation, like you mentioned, going over to like Great Britain is very easy to bring somebody over to the States. Maybe not during COVID, but that's, the point of the question is just to go, well, where do you find, with so many scouts that are out there, with so many different ways to watch guys just streaming online, which I know isn't the same as going to a game, but man, there's so much access out there. like, how do you find that diamond in the rough? And that's where, like, if again, going back to the Red Wings, if you start to try and figure out how do you go 25 straight years of playoffs, it's landing the diamonds in the rough that, you know, if they knew any better, if the rest of the league knew any better, those guys would have never gotten as far back in the draft as they ended up going. You were the second person I've asked that to that has brought up Great Britain. So it's got to be something where if there's a trend that's building, if two people are saying it, there you go. All right. Sorry, joking aside. I did want to ask your opinion on developing in general too. So this is something I also like to do in regards to like diving into what, if I have a hockey writer on, like what a part of your job is something the listeners can grab onto that'd be a little bit different from anybody else. But I do like to go into the actual development here of the prospects. And I want to ask you another generic question, not about the Red Wings, but if you had to put a finger on it, and there's probably a ton of variables, and this changes from player to player, team to team, but do you think from a development perspective, and this is huge for Red Wings fans because they want to get rid of Jeff Blashill because they think he's not developing players properly. Do you think from a development perspective, more is done as a kid in the minor leagues, the juniors, or are they getting the most amount of development from NHL ice time?
Ooh, it's a good question. It's kind of the $1 million question that every team is still trying to sort of strike a balance between. It's when is the kid ready? If he's ready, do we have a roster spot that's available for him that will maximize what he does well, or are we putting him into a spot where he's destined to fail? All of those are very, very tough questions to answer in a sport like hockey, where it doesn't come down to something as simple as if you've got a great wingspan in the NBA, chances are you're going to be a good defender or a good rebounder. Or if you can throw 100 miles per hour in the MLB, chances are even if you have control issues, you're still going to be at least a reliever at that level. So it's just not that simple with hockey. So I know that's not a firm answer, but I think the answer is that I don't know. In terms of an actual answer to the question, I think more and more NHL teams, I think, are having a real impact on these players. But I had a conversation with a coach in Minnesota for a story I'm working on one of the draft eligibles a couple of days ago. And he said, look, my theory is that the good players always stay the good players. Like the kid who's good at 10 years old, we can talk a lot about all the development that happens into their teenage years and beyond. But the kids who are the best players on the ice in Minnesota or in Michigan or in Ontario at 10, 11 years old, they pretty much almost all of the time stay the best at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old. So I think sometimes we also try to overcomplicate things. Sometimes one kid's just better than the next kid, and it's really that simple. But I do think increasingly that there's more of an impact being had at the NHL level with some of these departments that NHL teams have built for themselves. That there are limitations to how much you can train and work out, and some of these kids actually overdo both of those things in terms of conditioning and just over conditioning themselves, and it burns them out too early in their careers. But increasingly, NHL teams, I think, have found a nice market where they can actually mold these players more than they used to. And maybe it's less and less about player A is better than player B and more about, okay, we can fit this kid into the right spot, and we can work with what he does well and fix what he doesn't do well. So skating coaches are a big part of that. We always hear about the Barb Underhills of the world and the Darryl Belfries of the world, and these sort of gurus that NHL teams now turn to fix some of the quirks about their kids. So I think, I don't know, it's interesting. It's an emerging industry, and every team's budget is the same. So I think the wealthy teams are benefiting more from that nowadays than some of the teams that just don't have the resources to have these massive staffs of people who work on very individual plans with each of their players. But it's definitely getting there. It's definitely a sort of blossoming industry in hockey. And I think increasingly we're starting to see some of the impacts with some of the teams that just frankly do it better than other teams, with some of the teams that we talk all about whether they've drafted well, but maybe part of it is not just picking the better players on draft day. It's what happens after that. And there are teams, it would be a very hard thing to map out in firm terms, but there are teams that do that better than others. And I think you look at what the Philadelphia Flyers have done over the last several years. You look at what the Leafs have done over the last several years. I think the Vegas Golden Knights got it right basically from day one in terms of drafting and developing. Obviously, they've traded a lot of those kids to other teams, but they've done well. So it is, some teams are definitely doing it better than others.
Yeah, that actually is a great point, because I was going to ask you if you think, and your point of the Vegas Golden Knights works right into the question that popped in my head. If you think like the player turnover should be, I don't know, maybe I don't want to say it should be higher, but if teams should be more willing, if they don't feel the fit sooner, if it's worthwhile to try and find another fit, or if you think like there is that amount of leeway you give a player to develop them into that fit.
Yeah. And every team is worried about getting burned by the prospect, right? Like with the fit, if you give up on a kid who's 21 years old and he really clicks elsewhere, they know with a 28 or a 29-year-old what the other team is getting versus trading a prospect. I think you're right. It is a better choice for a lot of teams to trade that kid earlier when that kid has value. Or perceived value, at least. If you figured out that this kid's broken and he's not going to make it work, other teams may not have figured that out. So I do think there's, and Justin Bourne, who used to work at The Athletic, often spoke about this, but there's a window for prospects where if you're not absolutely convinced they're going to be a piece of the puzzle, they probably have more value earlier than later, because the longer you wait, the less they're worth. So I do think that's an element that teams should explore, but every team is afraid of that kid who just goes on to become a star, right? So that's the kind of thing for a general manager that sticks on your record, and that fans and your bosses, in terms of presidents and CEOs of these clubs, just don't forget. So it's a huge risk.
But yeah, taking a look at those higher value guys that the Red Wings have right now, you listed us as the fourth highest prospect group. That's probably the best way to put that grouping. What I don't want to do, I just want everybody to go over to The Athletic, check out what you said about the players. So that's that, right? But what I wanted to discuss where your head's at in regards to the timetable for these guys. Maybe this relates into maybe an extension of what we were just discussing because of COVID and development. But what are the odds of Red Wings fans? I'm going to take Mo Seider out of there, because I think he's going to be coming over next season based on what we're seeing right now. But for the likes of Lucas Raymond, Berggren, who's your number 3 on the list, Joe Veleno, and then Vollander, who you said you took a deep dive in, are we going to be seeing these guys in the next 2 years, or do you think there could be an issue with COVID slowing the development of some of these guys, that it's going to be a little bit longer? Because Lucas, I was just speaking with one of our bloggers for our website. One of my concerns is, or one of my biggest fears, was that we were going to be going a couple years before we saw him. And that's looking not necessarily based on his performance, but because of what's going on around the world, that it could just be something where we are waiting to, God forbid, 3 years as a Red Wings fan, God forbid. But yeah, how do you see that playing out? Or if you're seeing anything right now that kind of points us in that direction?
Well, I think Lucas is an interesting one, because I wrote this in advance of the draft, but he was always one of the kids at the top of the draft where it was going to be incumbent on the Red Wings and on Red Wings fans to say, okay, we need to be more patient with this kid. And when Tim Stützle is tearing it up, or Alexis Lafreniere is tearing it up, we need to make sure that we are grounded in, okay, it's not about the first couple of years of these kids' careers. It's about where they're at in their prime. And I think the same argument could have been made if they had taken Cole Perfetti. Like, Cole was going to be a kid who was just going to probably take a year or two longer than some of the other players taken in that range. And I think that's kind of still where you're at on Lucas. The potential, the excitement, his ultimate value in the prime of his career is a guy who has a chance to be a first-line winger in the NHL and run a power play unit. And those guys don't grow on trees, and extremely rare. So you have to be careful with him. Because he's not the biggest kid or the fastest kid, although he definitely is picked up a step this year, and I thought that was noticeable early on in the season after he came back from the summer. And I know in speaking to him during the summer that it was something that he was really keen on working on, because he was always a very agile, mobile skater in terms of his edges, but he was never an explosive player. And so he does look stronger on his feet. He looks more comfortable out there against professionals. All of that is true. But does that mean that he comes over and he plays in the NHL the next year, like you would probably hope a top 5 pick does in his second season after his draft? And the reality is that I think patience could be more valuable there than just plugging him into a lineup that isn't likely to be all that much better next year than it has been the last few years. So right. I really do think that patience with Lucas is really important. And I had a really interesting conversation with Tommy Virkkunen, who is the president and CEO of Karpat. And I'm doing a story on Aatu Räty. I spoke with him this morning, and he made a good point about how their philosophy is, if you're not capable of making the World Championships team, or if you're not at least in the conversation to make the World Championships team, then you should not be going over to the NHL, because odds are you're not ready, and odds are you're going to end up in the AHL. There may not be any Swedes or any Finns on that AHL team, and it can just start to be a little bit of a difficult situation. So I think Berggren is, on the flip side of Raymond, is the kid who's at that point right now, right? Like Berggren right. He's in the conversation to play for Sweden at Worlds. And when you're at that level, that means you're one of the best players in the SHL. And I would argue that the SHL is the 3rd best pro league in the world. So that's a big deal, right? So right. Berggren's closer, I would say, than Lucas is. Not to say that I don't think Lucas could play next year and be a fine piece. I think he could, and certainly he'd be good on the power play and all that. But I do think that someone like Berggren is closer, and that's just because of the level that he has reached in the SHL, which is a darn good level, right? So those are the kinds of players that I would be looking at for next year. Probably Berggren and Seider. I mean, Seider's at that same level in the SHL as well, right? So those two kids I think are close, and then Lucas, I don't know, maybe you just let him play another year in the SHL and go from there. I don't think that is cause for concern per se.
Gotcha. And so that ultimately my fear, I'll just take away the word fear and I'll just say, maybe that's just more reality and just calm down. It's one of those things, you know, like with being a Red Wings fan right now, it just feels like you're underwater, but each time, you know, Mo Seider lays a hit, it's like you're getting another flotation device or something underneath you. So it makes you get your head above water, and you want that boat to come around one of these days. And right now, I think it's safe to say that boat is probably a combination of captained by, not that he's going to be the captain of the team, but captained by Lucas Raymond, and of course the skipper will be Mo Seider, and there's got to be some crewmates in there. That would be Berggren. This is a fun road I just went down.
Well, you've got another pick coming in this draft too that should be high, so that'll help as well.
Exactly. Now, one of the guys I'm happy you mentioned that you took a closer look at with Wallinder. I actually put the stake of the show on this past draft because before we drafted, I said I wanted to see Lucas Raymond and Wallinder actually get picked in the second round. So right when that happened, I got a text message that said, "Wow, you better hope you were right because you got what you wanted." But what are you seeing right now from Wallinder?
Yeah, so I do this series called The Gifted every year, which is kind of a 10-part video series that I do where I release one piece every week, and it's starting tomorrow with a Noel Gunler, a Carolina Hurricanes prospect, and Wallinder will be the second week of it. And part of what the series is all about is not necessarily doing video deep dives on the best prospects in the world, but the ones who just for whatever reason fascinate me. And Gunler certainly qualifies for that, and so does Wallinder. And I think what's interesting about Wallinder is that the raw tools are there, right? So he's huge, he can skate, he's mobile, his footwork is impressive. And then the refined skills, which is actually what a lot of kids, it's normally the reverse these days, right? All of these kids these days have these ridiculously refined finesse, sort of soft skills and they can wow you in a practice, but they don't have some of the tools that translate in game or at least in NHL games in terms of the mobility, the size, that kind of a thing. So he's kind of the inverse to what a lot of prospects look like these days. And I think that's exciting because despite the fact that he maybe doesn't shoot the puck all that well, and he's got this weird grip on his stick that I'm going to highlight in the piece in terms of how high his hands are on his stick, and it just, there are little things about him that are just a little bit weird. But all in all, I think the idea of him is if you can put it together, if he can put it together, if he can really refine some of those areas where he may be a little bit further behind than his peers, then he's already got the skating, he's already got the length. And then suddenly those are the kinds of players who play in a top four instead of playing on the third pairing or in the AHL, right? So those are the players you should be targeting in the draft, are kids who have the potential to be something more than the depth players that you can just get in free agency for $1 million every August, right? Like it's always that conversation for me. It's you want to be taking swings. And I think Wallander kind of perfectly sort of qualifies as one of those swings. And frankly, Antti Tuomisto does as well. So the Red Wings have not shied away from going after projects, if you will. And that's not to say he's a bad player, that he's not talented. He is. And I'm going to highlight all of those things, but there's a lot of room for growth there. And I think that's what's exciting.
Yeah, and I think, like you mentioned before, and Red Wings fans know this, but we're still a few years away, even now. Like we're 2 years into 2 years deep into being one of the worst teams in the NHL, but we've probably still got a few to go. So if there's a guy that we can wait, if there's projects out there, that's something that I hope Wings fans know we can't shy away from or turn away from, because I think, I don't know if you'd agree on this, but I talked about these guys coming in as soon as possible, but there's also an element of making sure all of this lines up, because you don't want to have, like, it could be something where contract wise, that's where you want your head to be at. But when these guys start to come in, you're building this timetable of affordability, being able to go into free agency because you have these cheaper contracts of kids that are ready to play, and you're making work the guys that you've already put through your pipeline. And that's where the names like Dylan Larkin, who are going to be the highest paid players on the team, hopefully when we're successful, that's when those names are still part of the equation. So I that makes only too much sense, and I'm happy to hear that you found a lot of good things with Wallander. With you saying he's a project as well. But I can't thank you enough for coming on. I hope I can have you on again, because the articles are an absolute blast. Everybody, I implore you. We say it almost every show, but I hope you guys are checking out The Athletic, and especially Scott Wheeler's takes. I wanted to go into, you did I think you might have tweeted this. I'm not sure if this is the article, but the way too early 2022 list of the top 50 players. That'll make, for Red Wings fans, it's going to make you feel a lot better about what's going on right now. But absolutely. Scott, is there anything else you wanted to throw out there for the listeners to make sure that they do check out, including the article you mentioned on Wallander coming out?
Yeah, no, that's it. You got the piece coming out on Wallander, and in between me sort of hopping on the Red Wings beat every once in a while to do prospect stuff, you've also got Max Bultman at The Athletic, who is the best. Absolutely. So, you're in good hands if you're looking for good Red Wings coverage.